All right, Module 15 takes a look at managing data centers. So let's start out by looking at some different data center management tools. So data centers are going to provide the administrator with a view of the data center, and it's going to consist of active and passive components. Right, an active component is going to directly take part in the operations of a data center. Think something along the lines of um, programmable thermostat controls for temperature sensing and that kind of thing, right? That's going to be active. It's going to adjust based on information. Passive control is going to support the active components carrying out that data center operations, right? Passive component might just be a temperature sensor that feeds into the active component, like the electronic thermostat. All right, so here's some of our active components, right? Networking equipment, servers, computers, storage, right? So we can start to think about these. We're going to have active components for storage, like our storage area network tape backups. We're going to have network tools, right? Firewalls, that kind of thing, security management in there. We're going to have network operations, which are going to have more active components as well. Some of our passive components are going to be facility, power, cooling, cabling systems, racks, physical security, those kinds of things. All right, so we're going to have some data center monitoring software. So the monitoring software can observe the performance of IP-based devices. We can remotely assess the system's performance, and we can monitor network services like switches, bandwidth utilizations, routers, those kinds of things. We can look at our CC closed circuit TV stuff, biometric devices, will all function on our monitoring software. All right, so a data center manager are going to be responsible for all of the maintenance on all of the infrastructure in the data center. It's going to prepare the data center floor plans and schematic diagrams. We're going to use the data center management tools to minimize the downtime, and the data center manager needs to act immediately based on the alerts and the data that they received from the management tools. All right, different activities that a data center manager will utilize, right? So those management tools are going to help them to monitor all of the IT equipment in the data center. It's going to give them a visibility into the data center's infrastructure, right? It's going to allow them to look at what's taking place under the hood, so to speak. It'll help us to track and look at the health status of our components. We're going to get notifications and alerts when things are outside of the parameters that we've set, and it's going to analyze the data that we collect from all of the devices and display it on a dashboard. So instead of having to look at 15 different tools, you might have a dashboard that has 15 different buttons on it that you can look at that give you some instantaneous feedback on what's happening. All right, so I'm not going to read through this slide for sure, but let's just take a look at what some of these data center management tools are. All right, your electrical power management system, your EPMS, your building management system, your BMS, your server monitoring, your network monitoring, storage monitoring, and your IT service management, which is typically going to be something along the lines of like your ticketing system, so that you can have and keep track of incidents and that kind of thing. Because I think the other ones are pretty self-explanatory, so that's why I went into a little more detail on the IT service management side. All right, so a software-defined data center, an SDDC, can also be sometimes called a virtual data center. It's going to consist, of a storage facility that's going to have our hardware devices, network storage, CPU, memory. They're going to be delivered through a virtualization service. And we can provision and customize those in any way that's required by the organization that's going to request that virtual service from the data center. All right, some of the hardware dependencies, we can eliminate the need for hardware and mutual interface dependency because all functions can then be automated. So when changes get made, the SDDC is automatically going to learn those commands and interfaces using an AI mechanism And when there's a deviation or difference, it's going to automatically adjust based on what it's seen in previous iterations of this. So that adaptability is going to eliminate the need for some department personnel to monitor, say, segments of the network. So what we're doing is we're saying, right now we may have people that sit there and monitor the, look at the logs and monitor everything coming through. We can use something like an AI to go through and look at those things and then just pop out, give us alerts on things, which then allows the IT personnel to focus on more important tasks, and allow the AI to do some of that work underneath. It can also simplify our data management, right, through the use of our monitoring and configuration tools. We can have our applications go in and manage those complex infrastructure needs. So what it does is it's going to integrate the entire data center infrastructure as a single unit and allow us to manage it as the data center managers or administrators. All right, and we can, like I said earlier, we can use AI to automate some of the things that are going on, and allows our IT staff to focus more on fixing things, preparing things, monitoring incidents versus just looking at log data continually, right? We'll let the tool do that and give us alerts to say, hey, go out and check this out. So the other benefit with the SDDC is its proactive monitoring. Okay, it's going to have an improved reaction to monitoring the data center. It can tell us when we have slow performance. It can look for issues in the network or issues with IP addresses, and it can look for security threats and give us an alert to go out and find and repair those issues that we might run across. All right, so change management is going to be our systematic approach to transition and transform our changes inside the data center, right? As we know with technology, changes are always on the horizon. They are inevitable because things change all the time. They may be required in our systems, our equipment, process, personnel. We need to manage our change management process so that we can have smooth functioning without downtime. All right, so change management is important to consider and plan for, and that's going to be true if you're introducing new systems, old systems, performing infrastructure maintenance, or just servicing the data center, right? So we may have a time where we're replacing network cables, for example, fiber optic cables, power cables. We want to be able to use a change management process or tool so that we can operate this in phases, right? And that way we can minimize downtime, right? We may need to decommission legacy hardware and software. How do we shut these things down without impacting other places? How do we do configuration and process updates? How do we have security, put security patches in? That kind of thing. How do we monitor these tool changes and updates, right? Maybe it updated to a different version. How do we do that and minimize downtime? Again, need for change management is important. Right? Other things that we may see is an expansion. Okay, this is something that we see a lot. Like I said earlier, a few modules before. Data center growth is over 10%. Has been for a while. It's projected to be over 10% for a while, which means we may expand the data center. We may have a merger or acquisition, and I can tell you from personal experience, mergers and acquisitions cause a lot of disruption in your environment because you're trying to integrate two companies that may be using different technologies. So we want to take a look at all of these things and plan through change management on that to be more efficient in what we're doing. All right, I like this slide. It's excuse me, it's kind of busy, but in change management, when we have a proposed change, we want to go through and create a plan, right? And that plan should tell us who, what, when, where, and how that change is going to be implemented. So if we go through and answer each of these 7 R's, it can help us to create an effective plan, right? We can say, who raised the change, right? Who is the initiator of this, right? What's the reason for it, right? So why is the purpose? What are the returns, right? What's the benefit to the organization to make this change? What are the risks? So that way we can put in some risk and mitigation planning. What resources are required in terms of team, skills, training, whose responsibility, who's responsible to do this, and what are the relationship changes that we might run into with this new change. All right, so as part of that change management process, we want to be able to effectively manage the change. And we can use a basic process like what we see here on the slide, and use the answers that we got from the 7 R's on the previous slide to build our change management plan, right? We can identify the components, present the business case, look at the downtime, determine what resources are required, communicate the changes to the stakeholders, monitor the dependencies, risks, and the budgeting process, and then how can we evaluate the success and failures. And then the one thing that too many people skip is number 8, right? Look at the changes and plan improvements, right? We want to look at what happened during this process and how we managed that. All right, so some of the best practices here for change management, right? We want to make sure that we have the right people in place to do the job. We want to make sure that this change aligns with the purpose and the organization's objectives, right? Then we have to sell the change. We have to convince the stakeholders that this is necessary, it's beneficial, and it's the right thing to do. And then we need to communicate the change, right? Because most change is going to impact people in the organization. We need to talk through what the changes are. People need to know how that will impact them in the organization in general. We need to figure out when we're going to time this change, right? How long of a process is this going to be? Is it a day? Is it a week? Is it months? How long will this take during the change? And what issues might we bump into? All right, we want to iron out all of the issues. We want to figure out the problems first. We want to test this before we push it out. We want to nominate bar raisers, it says. So we want to look for internal resources that are going to raise the bar. They're going to review the changes and give us guidance or suggestions based on what they know. We want to keep all the materials related to the change management up to date. We want to be able to integrate it. We want to monitor the change at the system level and personnel level, so we want to check in with people and see, hey, here's what we expected to happen. How is this working out for you? And then lastly, be flexible, right? Accept those questions, concerns, and give feedback, implement changes if necessary. All right, decommissioning. This is something that we don't often think about. We think about upgrading and getting the newest and the latest and the greatest, but we sometimes don't think about what do we do with the old stuff. So again, when we decommission in the data center, that basically means we are replacing or retiring old servers. It is a regular activity in any IT organization. Decommissioning risks that we might run into is we're going to have a disruption, right? We're going to take this server and replace it with a new one, which means we have to either start from scratch to build it, or we clone it, or how are we going to do that? It is a complex process. It can cause business disruption, and it can hamper the future, right? If we wait too long, we do this wrong, we can have some issues moving forward. So why would we decommission? Well, we can replace our servers. We can move all of our data center to a central location. We can use new hardware to improve security speed and updates. We could be going into co-location, but typically what you're going to see is this, right here. Replacing and upgrading old equipment. All right, so when we're going to decommission, we want to set up a plan, right? We're going to establish our migration plan, how are we going to move the data from the old servers to the new servers. Then we're going to have to perform that migration process, right? We're going to have to migrate the data over and create migration certificates. We need to establish a decommission plan, right? We want to preserve the data in the applications when we decommission the old system, and then we want to perform that decommissioning. So once we've approved the plan, we want to decommission the old system. And what does that involve, right? How do we get rid of this old equipment? What security measures do we have in place, right? Do we destroy the equipment? Do we sell it? Do we donate it? What do we do with it? We can then perform post-decommissioning review, right? Sit down at the end, look at the timelines. Did we meet our goals? Did we do each step the way we had planned? And then we document what we learned about the process. If something didn't go to plan, what can we improve on for next time? All right, so to make sure your decommissioning process goes well, we need to set up a project management, it says office here, but we just need to set up a project management group, right? And that group needs to define the scope and the budget, establish the timeline and what our cutover date is, which means the cutover is when we cut off the old equipment into the new equipment. How do we manage the risk? How do we inform people? And then we actually need to physically go out and audit this and make sure we did it right. All right, so once we have finalized it, we need to finalize our updated asset map. Okay, so we need to update the asset list with the new information, and we may have a map. We want to put that into the map. We need to run some tests and simulations before we do that. We're going to want to create a comprehensive backup. We're going to want to do a very specific, probably a bitwise backup on the system before we shut it down. We're going to disconnect it. We're going to verify the documentation that we did it right, and then we're going to get rid of it. And that's sounds like an easy process, but it does take a bit of effort. Okay, and that gets us to the end of Module 15.